Take it away.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I don't think many people bother delving into my background for curiosity. Well, since you kind of ask and everything, and that's a silly thing of me, isn't it? I didn't connect the clicker. But there we go. Let's just use the good old keyboard. At least I've got a keyboard. I'm not that good at tech. So yes, well, I'll tell you a few things you didn't find out about me then in that case. Bit about me. So I've been using computers since they came to be possible to be used in your house. Had a BBC Micro for my research project at university where I'd studied chemistry. My dad brought home a research machines computer from BT when they were chucking it out. They had a 20 megabyte hard drive and 2 10-inch floppy disks. When I was about 15, I used to go into school and we had a pet computer and someone left the manual in the drawer. So I programmed a squash court game because it had all the memory locations for the screen in the manual, and I was able to peek and poke the screen and things. So that's where my coding goes back to, and Pascal on a mainframe at university. But no, I'm not really a very good programmer. I dabble in Python now, but yeah. So done all sorts of things, wired up coax networks, and been doing information security ever since head of IT came to me, Microsoft Office trainer. I'm a bit of a geek at Excel and things as well, and said, we need someone to do our ISO 27001. And I then ended up scanning the network for MAC addresses and doing all sorts of PowerShell to find out what was all on the computers and things. And so got into InfoSec, and then I was the only information security person for the fire service I worked for. And that was through WannaCry, which fortunately our firewall kept us safe from. So yeah, been through some interesting InfoSec days and things, right through to the National Crime Agency ringing up and saying, we've got one of your employees' passwords. So currently working for Sainsbury's. We're sponsoring this event, but that has nothing to do with why I'm here, because it was all kind of submitted independently and things, but it's really nice as a sponsor to be able to come and speak to you. We do quite regularly hire for roles, and so we do have some true entry-level positions. If you've got if you can prove some ability, all the way up to internal pen testers and everything. So keep your eye on Sainsbury's.jobs if you'd like to work for us. It's a very nice culture there. Everyone's very friendly and supportive. And so recently I've been working a lot with cloud-based infrastructure, so my talk will be biased towards that. We've been doing a big migration between 2 clouds, and so I've been using my threat modeling technique to do that, and it's actually seems to have worked out pretty well, really, with our final pen test results coming back with not much wrong with what's been built, which is always nice to see. So I'm on Twitter, all about Clate. These are my personal views in this presentation. And amongst my other skills, I've got 2 Blue Peter badges. I can artificially inseminate cows, so that's what AI means to me. And I'm missing 3 centimetres of my brain, and that's the truth, and it probably explains a lot of what you'll hear from here anyway. So if you think it's a bit mad, that explains it. So, misconfiguration. And I think you'll probably all see this in your organisations. I see people on Twitter who are consultants for security advice and testing and support and things, saying all over the place, people just don't do security very well. And one of the ways we see this manifested is through our cloud security hub scans, our vulnerability scanners on-prem, everything, saying we've got these hordes of vulnerabilities. Our pen testers find the same sorts of bad flaws over and over again that people haven't fixed at an earlier stage. And, we've got other areas in which there are weaknesses, such as Active Directory and credentials exposed in various places. And And the Cloud Security Alliance recently published a report which showed that these misconfigurations are often responsible for some of the big impacts, big events that happen. And so while a lot of the time we're lucky and we get away with it, when somebody does manage to get in through some method, that's it. It's game over, because there's just so much opportunity to exploit everything. So those are the areas they particularly found were poorly secured. And some of those breaches that were linked to that, so these are the largest personal data disclosing incidents that involved poor configuration. So again, storage exposed in the cloud, things that haven't been patched, just generally exposing things to the internet where people then can try and attack them, and often, unfortunately, are successful. So, it does matter. Although we may think a lot of these things are internal, the problem is that you may not realise that actually something of it is external. And I think that's one of the problems with a tool where you've got to build your infrastructure in the cloud, and then it'll tell you how bad it is, because it's already built and it's already out there and could be accessible and being attacked. So you need to get that early stage and work out what you need to put in place. And the problem as well, when we build a lot of these things in the cloud, our infrastructure has got vulnerabilities just from the moment you set it up. You set up some Azure storage, and it comes with public access configured, public internet access configured by default, because it needs a kind of a DNS entry and everything. And you've got to actively put those network controls in to block that access. And if people don't realise that, they just blindly think, I need some storage, and they go and spin it up, and they don't think about the implications of everything else around that. And there's all sorts of other instances where things get public IPs by default. Why? Can't we put that on afterwards if we do really need it? The other problem as well, the doomed temple of temporal trade-offs. I wanted to make something that will make you remember this phrase. Now, if I say to you, do you want £50 now or £2,000 in 2 years' time, what are you going to take? You're very unusual. Who would take £50 now? Hands up. Most people do. I don't think you're telling the truth. I did some research at work. I was actually researching the difficulties in getting people to build cost-effective architecture. So often things are expensive to run because people have oversized their compute. They've not used the most cost-effective storage, all sorts of things like that. Now, if you put the effort in, you can build that cost-effectiveness in from the start. So I did a questionnaire and asked people about how they built things and, what challenges they had. And what came out of it was, we just want to get it built, and we don't put the effort in to those extra things that would make it cheaper to run. And I'm sure that's exactly the same thing with why we don't get security in. And you probably see it so much of life. The builder that comes to your house and does a job does the bare minimum. They could have gone that little bit further and, solved another problem without much effort, or done it so it would last a lot longer, but they didn't. And then, I know they want more work, but, if it causes you big problems, it's not really a very good way of doing it, and then it damages their reputation. Everybody just wants to get the job done quickly, and so they do things as quick as possible to get the desired effect, and which is why most people will take the 50 quid, because we get the instant gratification. And I'm sure most of you would, really, if I offered you 50 quid cash in the hand. So threat modelling. So threat modelling, hopefully most of you have heard of it, but if you haven't, go and read up on it, look into some of the information on the net about it. A process designed to try and help you work out how to secure things as you're building them. And so that it should be a cyclical process that goes round and round again, like we've used probably in lots of other areas of information security. So we look at what we're building, we try and work out what could go wrong, we then put in controls to mitigate that, and then we look at did that do a good enough job, and we go round again until we get to a point where we think we've done a good enough job. Because sometimes good enough is not putting everything in place, but just enough to make it good enough. And there's frameworks out there that can help you with this, and I'm just introducing you to these now just so as we go on the rest of the talk you've kind of got a feeling for them. They're ones you might want to go and look into later. I'll explain more about the names in a moment. So Stride is quite good for a small organisation when you're getting started. Looks at some kind of obvious categories of issues that could arise, and you try and identify things in those various categories at various points in your architecture. Dread, you can actually put some numbers to this. So you may want to work out how bad is this really. So dread might be a method you could try in that case. And pasta, if you actually want to go on to doing attack simulations and things and actually get even more mature in how you design your architecture, then that might be the way for you to go. And maybe that might help you with designing infrastructures that you can use as standard patterns. And again, standard patterns are something that can greatly help in reducing our vulnerabilities, because everything comes up the same. So STRIDE, the letters stand for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. And I've got the various controls there that you would use. It is sometimes difficult, though, to classify problems as to which category they should sit in. Sometimes people add an LM onto the end of STRIDE for lateral movement. Because if you don't have LM, where do you put lack of network segregation? Is it elevation of privilege because there's a sort of lack of authorization? Or is it a tampering sort of thing, that the network is not integrally sound? Malware, vulnerabilities, I think they probably ought to come under tampering because, it's a bit of an integrity issue. I don't think it really matters too much about where something sits, just that you've thought about this could go wrong. But I think it is easy to get hung out of where do I put that particular type of threat. Dread, as I say, this is more quantitative. So you look at the damage potential, how much impact it would have, how easy you can reproduce this attack, how easy it is to exploit, how many users it would affect. That's quite a big one, probably quite easy to measure for some things, and how easy it is to detect and to discover. And then process for attack simulation and threat analysis, PASTA. And so this is where you work through the same sort of STRIDE kind of thing of identifying the threats, but then you get into simulation and more analysis of the risk and impact. So I just put them out there for you for a kind of description of those. And when we're doing this sort of thing, we might use a data flow diagram like this to help us analyse our threats. So we just draw our infrastructure out in a very simple way, using symbols to represent external entities, processes and data stores and the like, and then show how our data flows. And then what we do is we put trust boundaries at the points where we think there's a potential that an attack could take place. So I put one there between my external user and sorry, I'm not drawing very well to put my glasses on. Anyway, you get the idea. You put this here where between our external user and an Azure data factory there. And likewise, I would put them also on the other information flows. So you can do a very simple diagram, even if you don't know exactly how your architecture will look, and you can do some basic threat modelling that way. But the problem we have, I think, when we get round to threat modelling is how we identify what could go wrong. And this is where I think we perhaps get into Rumsfeld's known knowns and unknown unknowns and the like. And so I had to think about this in the area of threat modelling. And I think known knowns, developers often do appreciate some of the things they should do because they do them day in, day out. And maybe, if they've been nagged about disclosing secrets or something, their secrets management gets better. And if they've built certain infrastructure of a certain type over and over again, they're probably very good at knowing what security should go in there. But then when they wander off into something new, they're perhaps not quite so aware. We then get the unknown knowns, and these are the ones which I really think we need to work to try and surface. And they're things like the best practice that the cloud providers publish. So you go and look at their document pages and kind of manual pages, and you see all this information on the baselines of how you should securely figure something. But how many developers actually go and search that out and look at it? Do they just build the thing and connect it and it works and job done? So it's an unknown known. We know full well what should be done, but it's unknown because someone hasn't bothered to look or doesn't even know to look, perhaps. Then we get known unknowns. So an example of a known unknown is the result of an election. You know the election's going to happen, you just don't know what the result's going to be. So we know new vulnerabilities are going to come out all the time. We perhaps know with some products more than others that a new vulnerability is going to come out. I won't mention any names or I'll get in trouble. We know that humans make errors, and perhaps there's things we can put in our system to help reduce that. But the fact is we need to have some sort of patching, updating mechanism in there so that when these things happen, we can deal with them. And then the unknown unknowns, the black swans. But if you've minimised all the rest, then hopefully you're getting less going on from them, and when a black swan arrives, you're a little bit more able to deal with it. Now, there's a black swan going on at the moment because nobody knew that myself and Simon Painter were coming to this conference. We live about 20 miles apart. We were on the same module of Open University, and we met each other while we were studying that back before COVID. And we've randomly ended up miles away from home talking in the same conference in the same slot. If that isn't a black swan, don't know what is. So there you go. Black swans, they do happen. So sources of inspiration. When you're looking for those things you should do when you're doing your threat modelling, there's been suggestions of, playing card games and using those to remind you about Stride, for instance, spoofing, tampering, looking at those categories. Those categories are useful to make you think, but it is so hard for those things to come in your mind. So certainly the policies you have in your organisation are a very good place to go because they probably already mandate your password length, your encryption that you should use, etc., etc. So that might be a few things in there that you can compare. The problem is wading through them and finding those particular nuggets, so maybe pulling them out of the policies could be useful. Then this best practice that I've been talking about. So this is where I've really been seeing the benefits, because I've taken the infrastructure components my engineers have been using and I've trawled through the best practice. There are places where you can sometimes find summaries of some of the high-level ones that are obvious to apply. But I've trawled through those and then put them into my tool so that I can easily bring them out in an architecture diagram and tell people this is what you need to put in place. And that's worked well because those things have then ended up in place. We've had chats about them in stand-ups when there's been issues in implementing them. And then in the end, it's all been resolved, it's gone in place, and everyone's happy. And we've got better secured infrastructure. MITRE CAPEC is a nice one. And particular Brett Crawley's mapping of that to Stride. On the last slide, I've got some links for you of where that information can be found, and I'll show you a diagram of it in a moment. But that maps the common weakness categories to Stride to then help you when you're going through spoofing. How does spoofing happen in real life? And, you know, because that is all based on previous incidents, I put previous incidents there because as an organisation, if you have incidents happen, it's a good opportunity to grab that knowledge and build it into some central information of when you build this, make sure you don't do that. If you've got the luxury of the resources, in-house red teams and the like might come in and help look at your infrastructure and say, this is how I would attack it, and give you some ideas of what they particularly go for. And then, of course, if you've got deep pockets, you can pay for commercial tools, which might have done a lot of the hard work for you. But I'm basing this on things that don't cost you any money. So I'm just going to go now into an example. So this is Microsoft's free threat modelling tool. And you can configure it to make your own templates and put threats in any form you want. You can also add as much information as you like. So if you want to map to ISO 27001 or map to your internal policies or something like that, you could do for each threat. And that would then help provide a report that tells you why this is an issue and what kind of standards it breaches. Legislation would be another one as well, wouldn't it? This is required by legislation. So we've got there a data factory with some storage and a key vault. And I bet I forgot to open up, yes, I'm going to put my glasses on a moment because I did not open up my report from that, which I wanted to show you. So coming out of that, we can get an HTML report There we go, there's the sample. Right, there we are. So there's a sample report, cleaned it up a little bit. One of the headaches with the Microsoft threat modelling tool, say it's free, but free comes at a price inevitably. It gets rather anal about sanitising everything. And so it turns every ampersand into an ampersand amp semicolon after it's turned HTML into ampersand and symbol codes and things. So you do have to go through and clean it up, but I think it's a small price to pay. Otherwise, it's quite a nice tool. So there we are. You get the kind of output it produces for each part of the diagram and tells you the kind of things that can go wrong with default configuration. You can actually put some options on your infrastructure to say what you've got in place, and so you can then put conditions in so that if this is in place, don't tell them it's not secure. So that's how that works. If I minimise that, I should be able to get the thing I had back up before. And there you are. That's Brett Callow's mapping of Stride to the CWEs. So it's quite nice how they're broken down under the various categories to help you with that kind of inspiration point. So if you want to get deeper into threat modelling, as I say, go and look on the web. There's lots of information about it, and some of the links that you'll have in a moment will give you some good places you can go. But hopefully, from what I've been describing so far, you'll see how this fits in with some of the elements. This isn't the full manifesto, it's just a few that I've pulled out. But yeah, that culture of finding and fixing issues. The repeatability, I think if you're taking the best practice, that does give you the repeatability because you can bring it out every time that resource is used and it will come out with the same advice, hopefully. And, the thoroughness, you've got that knowledge built into the tool to help you with that. Following your design changes, you can put a new design into your tool and come out with a new report based on anything that's changed. The early frequency analysis, I think, is something that as you mature, hopefully, you do this more and more, and you keep updating your information on what can go wrong so that you can account for anything new that might happen. So there are some useful links for you. I've got some AWS and Azure-based sources of information because I imagine they're things that a lot of us use, but also some other threat modelling information outside of that. So I hope that might be some use to you. Go, if you want a free tool to play with, go and get the threat modelling tool and have a try with it. But you will find that the templates that come with it are very old. It's been unloved for a long time, unfortunately. And but if you want to build your own templates, it's a very easy thing to put your own information into. Does anyone have any questions for my last couple of minutes? Stunned you all to silence. Yeah. Oh, trust you.
Well, just one observation of the question. My understanding is that Stride was more about the design process, and Dread was more about tracking bugs. So when you get a bug report in, that's where that discoverability and reproducibility comes in. Because it's how easy is it for somebody to find that bug, and then what's the...
Yeah, I suppose it's true that still those frameworks could be applied in different situations and will fit different situations better. But again, they're just frameworks. They're just there, to help you with it. And as I say, although Stride may help you, as I say, also going to the best practice, I think, gets in some of that stuff which, because of the temporal trade-offs, don't get picked up and don't get done, but could be done so easily.
How do you ensure the evolution of best practice across an organisation?
Still in early stages, and, it's something, I think, partly through your measuring and monitoring, because if you're then still seeing the vulnerabilities, you'll see the vulnerabilities more in the areas where this process hasn't been done so thoroughly. And so then it starts to become more apparent that there's an issue in that area, and then you can work on getting the process more into those areas and getting the better results, yeah.
Have you any tips on how you can introduce this into an organisation that will do threat modelling? Sometimes even designs a step too far and getting around on the key.
Yeah. Well, as I say, if you get that opportunity to get the kind of low-level design of the architecture, just try and get hold of it and try and do some threat modelling and present the results and then say, look, you build these things in, you'll make it more secure than it might have otherwise been. And, see where you go from there as a start. I think sometimes, although threat modelling, they often talk about get a group of people to do it, but if you've got some information, doing something is better than doing nothing.
Start small.
Yeah, start small.
Yeah, we'll have to call it there so the next speaker can go, but can't grab Andrea afterwards and we'll let the next speaker in to get themselves checked up. Thank you.